Whoa. If any of you have ever read my books, can I just say thank you? And seriously, that the most important person in a book is the reader. If you didn't read them, I couldn't write them. So you're very important people. I'm Terry Deary. I'm a writer. And when I say that, it's not just what I do, it's who I am. I am a writer. Like I've got, there's a family dog called Carrie. And she's a Labrador. And she didn't choose to be that. She just is. I mean, sometimes she thinks she's a Rottweiler when the postman comes, and that lasts all of 2 seconds as she rushes to the gate and then, please pat me while I lick you. You can't always help the thing you are. And I'm a writer. I don't want to be a writer. I just am, right? You've got to understand that is who I am, not what I want to be. And being a writer is quite a low-status job. I discovered this about 30, 40 years ago. I used to be a children's author, and so when you're a children's author, people say, will you come into our school and talk to our children? What about? Oh, it doesn't matter. Just inspire them. Don't know how to do that. So having inspired a group of juniors, it got to 12 o'clock and I was getting a bit hungry. And the teacher said, oh, you can go into the dinner hall and have a school dinner, but the infants go in first. So you'll have to sit with the infants. Have you ever sat on an infant chair? A little boy came and sat next to me. And this was in a little town in Yorkshire called Middlesbrough. And as he sat next to me, the first thing he said to me was, I could fight you. It was awkward. I didn't really want to fight him, because if I'd beaten him, people would have said, what a bully. If he'd beaten me, I'd have looked a right prawn. So I said very diplomatically, I'm a bit bigger than you. He said, I don't care how big they are. I just kick him in the knackers and run. This is Middlesbrough. And they said, are you from ICI? Because across the road from the school was the ICI factory. And I said, no. I said, I'm a writer. And I expected a bit of, ooh. Middlesbrough. He says, you what? I said, I write books. Oh, he said, you haven't got a job then. That's me. I have not got a job. I am a writer. Can't help it. People ask me my favourite period in history. And quite honestly, they were all dirty and disgusting. Foul food, terrible toilets, cruel, diseased. So my favourite period in history, and I always get asked this at Horrible History signings, is when I grew up in the 1950s. It was safe. We had no money, but that didn't seem to matter. It was a pleasant, maybe I'm just sort of looking through rose-coloured glasses, but I always say the 1950s. A little girl came to me, not far from here, at the Garrick Theatre. I was signing books. What is your favourite period in history? I said, it's when I grew up in the 1950s. Oh, she said, was that the Middle Ages? She was out of hospital in no time. I'm not a historian. I'm not nothing really. All I ever wanted to be was a country music singer. I was on radio the other week. I don't know if you'll get this. And there was somebody called Sally Bowles on BBC in Wales. And we talked about me wanting to sing folk music or country music. And she said, you know, you've had a good career out of being a writer. I said, yeah, but I'd rather be a folk and country singer. And she straight away says, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you heard a naughty word there. A folk and country singer? I now say I wanted to be a country singer. Lesson learned. I had to give up my career as a folk and country singer when I became a professional actor in the middle of Wales. Because there was a company of 5 people and we were telling stories about the area we were in, visiting church halls, libraries, schools, and so on. There were no scripts. You couldn't go to the local library and pull a script off the shelf for 5 people, 3 female, 2 male. So we had to improvise. We had to take the local history and turn it into a play. And we'd do a scene and say, yeah, that's good. And then we'd do another one, another anecdote. And it seemed that I had the knack of putting together these anecdotes into a story structure, making a play. I didn't know I was a writer until then. Until eventually they stopped improvising and they just said, right, Terry, we've got a summer holiday. Yeah. When we come back, we've got to do a children's schools tour. Okay. When we come back, can you have written a play for us? So what are you doing? Oh, we're going on holiday. Thank you. I produced a play. Something that I'd always wanted to do was to look at good and evil. Because I, as a kid, used to go and watch the movies in black and white at the cinema for 6pence, and used to jump on your seats and cheer for the goodies and boo for the baddies. It was mayhem. But you always noticed that the baddies had black hats and the goodies had white hats. And this was, of course, racism. And I was determined I was going to create a character who was neither good nor bad. He was tough on the outside, but inside he was a bit of a cowardy custard. So I called him the Custard Kid. And the Custard Kid, because of his tough outside, got into trouble. He took some jewels by mistake, and the audience were the witnesses. They were called up to say, did you see what happened? And the kids were the witnesses. He was put on trial, and the kids then decided guilty or not guilty, and eventually you ended up with the verdict, and what should we do with him? I've got to say, there's an actor, he's gone on to do Hollywood movies, and he played the Custard Kid very well, and he was so sympathetic, even if he was found guilty. You know, what should we do with him? Oh, let him go, sort of on probation. Oh. After about 4 weeks of this tour, we got a bit bored. Same show twice every day. The greatest success was in both Wales, where the audience were on the floor in a sort of semicircle. And in front of one little girl, there appeared a big puddle. She'd wet herself laughing. What greater accolade can you have than that? So what we did was, because we were getting bored, we would put all the names into a hat. Each character, 4 characters by then. And we'd pull it, and whoever name you pulled out, you had to play. And sometimes I got to play the Custard Kid. You know, is he guilty or not guilty? Guilty! Oh, what should we do with him? Hang him! I never had quite Nigel's charm. But I did think that after the tour had finished, we packed up all the costumes, the cowboy hats, the chaps, and then the Custard Kid was effectively dead. Oh. About 2 years later, I was in the library in Lowestoft. I'd moved jobs to be theatre director. And I thought, oh, I'm bored with all the books in the library. I'm going to start at 0.001 and move round. There at 0.001 was how to be a writer and get published. It actually exists. I've got a copy in my attic. And I read it and it said, what you need to do is write about something you know. I thought, what do I know? Custard Kid. So I turned the Custard Kid play of mine into a novel. I had a great advantage because I'd had all those great actors building the characters for me, and I never gave them a penny in royalties. Being a bit ignorant, I put my manuscript in a big brown envelope, like the book told me to, and sent it off with a covering letter. Here is my book for children aged 7 to 11. You know, if you're really nice to me, you can publish it. You know. And after a couple of weeks, back came the big brown envelope with my script in. And some of them were really nice. Thank you for your manuscript. It's a very nice story. Unfortunately, we don't have room for it in our lists, that sort of thing. And the nicest one was, thank you for your story. Unfortunately, we only publish prayer books. Research. After 23 times, the 24th one came back, a little white envelope. We like your story, we're going to publish it. Yes! So my first book, The Custard Kid, was on the way. And of course, what every writer, every person in the world needs is what's called a reality check. I published a book, I was a writer, anything I wrote was going to be published, so I sent off my second book, The King of Tarantulas, another play I'd done with the company, and back it came. They don't want it. What? How dare they? I'm a writer. Came back twice, 3 times, came back 23 times. 24th time was not the magic number. It came back 73 times. And that's when I had one of those light bulb moments. I know why they don't like it. Because it's rubbish. And it's now in my attic gathering dust somewhere. So I sent off my third one, a totally new one, based on a local legend, and it was accepted first time. I was on the way. And after about 15 years, I was published so many children's books, I'd stopped sending books to publishers, and they were coming to me. I was what's seen as a safe pair of hands. You know, Terry, will you write a thriller for teenagers? Will you write social real? And so, and then one year they came to me and said, Terry, what we want to do is write a Father Christmas joke book. Oh, I'm not proud. What is Tarzan's favourite Christmas song? Jungle Bells. I didn't say they were good jokes, but the book was a huge hit. I said, now, Terry, will you, next year, let's follow it up. Will you write a history joke book? Yeah. Where did the French buy their guillotines? In a shopping centre. What do you mean, oh God? That was pretty much the publisher's reaction as well. Maybe you could put in some history facts to sort of lighten the groan factor. For example, what did the French, and this is true, not the joke, right? What did the French test their guillotines on? What would you test a guillotine on, madam? An orange, yeah! No. A grapefruit, even bigger than an orange? No. A turnip, watermelon, great. No, they tested them on corpses from the local mortuary. Yeah, and that's it. The reaction is, ugh. And then, when I was an actor, my acting tutor always said, the main reason for doing drama is to answer one question, and one question only: why do people behave the way they do? And that is a very good example of human behavior, because could you do it? Could you pick up a corpse, take it to this new machine, pull a string, let the blade drop and see if it works? Because you don't want to hurt the criminal, do you? You want to off. Then you've got to then pick up the 2 bits. Who said that? Madam, do you know what my most famous book series is? Horrible Histories. Oh yeah, that one. It's a bit of a clue. So yeah, horrible facts. And instead of a joke book with facts, we ended up with a fact book with jokes. Nobody had done that before. And it was a success. So they said, write more, write more, write more. After a couple of years, the first one came out in 1993. After 2 years, they said, will you write one about the blitzed Brits? And I've got a story about that, which is key to all my philosophy. But I'll come back to that in a minute. The blitzed Brits came out in 1995. New children's book. And the bookshop said, oh, 1995, it's the 40th anniversary of the end of World War II. Yeah, I think. It's 50th, is it? There's only three sorts of mathematician. Those that can add up and those who can't. It was the 50th anniversary of World War. So they did book displays for children in Carrie's War, Goodnight Mr. Tom, and that sort of thing. And there in the middle was a totally new title, Blitz Brits. And there was a program on television that year called Bookworm with Griff Rhys-Jones, who used to review books and talk about them and interview people. And along the bottom was a sort of ticker tape, with news. And along the bottom that week I was watching this week's children's bestseller, Horrible Histories, Blitz Brits by Terry Deary. My wife was in the kitchen cooking Sunday dinner. I said, oh, look at that, look at that. She came rushing through from the kitchen. What's the matter, what's the matter? I said, I'm #1 bestseller. She said, oh, is that all? I thought there was something wrong. So again, it levels you, doesn't it, families? So that's, the series really took off on the back of that. And then along came the television, of course, in which I appeared a lot in the first 3 series, usually as a monk. One of the greatest thrills was, I'm from the city, stop popping. I'm from a city called Sunderland. You might have heard of it. Centre of the universe. And Britain's greatest historian was the Venerable Bede, who came from Sunderland. He's now Britain's second greatest historian. And the television company said, oh, we've got this monk we want you to act as to camera. I said, oh, who is it? They said, oh, it's somebody called the Venerable Bede. I said, he's from Sunderland. You give it to me because I'm from Sunderland. You want me to... I said, oh, is he? We didn't know that. What an amazing coincidence that I got to play the Venerable Bede, my hero. He was the one who was lying on his deathbed, and he was dictating the life of St. Cuthbert to a scribe. And he got to the last page and said, it is done. And he died. That's how I want to go. In the saddle. Yeah, Venerable Bede. They also gave me some... They made a movie called Rotten Romans with people like Lee Mack and Alexander Armstrong. And I got to play a warrior from Gaul who offered Nero a present, which he didn't like, so he ordered that I be taken off to be killed. Phew. 2 weeks later, they said, we're doing a television series again. Can you come in and play a part? Who do you want me to play? Archduke Ferdinand of Austria. I think they're trying to tell me something. Excuse me if I have a quick drink of water. Of course, the downside of writing books. The upside is having wonderful readers. The downside is you've got to work with editors. And editors are odd people. They don't always get my jokes, which is very hurtful. There's once a true story that Celts against the Romans, if they were losing the war and their family had come to watch them, as they did, they would kill their family who'd come to watch them to save them being kidnapped and turned to slaves by the Romans. Kill the wife and children. Then they'd kill themselves. I said, right, here's the joke to go with that anecdote. A Celt warrior is holding a knife to his heart, and the rest of the family are standing around laughing. She says, I don't know what you're laughing at, you're next. I know it's not the best joke in the world, but the editor came back and said, how can they be next? It's a joke. The Saxons, if a warrior or a man killed a child, they would be punished by having the hand that killed the child cut off. So there he is with his hand on the block. The axeman has the axe raised, and the mother of the dead child says, if I had my way, I'd cut off his nut. Cut off his nut. The editor came back and said, shouldn't that be cut off his nuts? No. You get it, yeah. Reminds me of how one letter can make a difference. The Yorkshireman, this is not a true story, who his wife died. At this point you can say, oh. And he went to the engraver of monuments and said, on her gravestone, because he was Yorkshire, I want a name, a date, and Lord, she was thine. And he came back after a week and said, you can't put that, because he read the gravestone and it said, Lord, she was thin. Said the engraver, oh, for goodness sake, I've got to bury it in 2 hours' time. There should be an E on the end, you idiot. No worries, sir. I'll have it done in half an hour. Come back in half an hour. He went back in half an hour and he read it. Lord, she was thin. Editors also try to rewrite your books. Do you get the impression I don't like editors? They're lovely people, just they're not very in tune with my brain, what there is of it. So there are some things that they do get wrong. Guy Fawkes was going to be hanged by the neck till he was half dead. He's then cut down, still alive, laid out, have his body split open and his guts burned on a brazier in front of him. And in order to avoid this, he climbed the ladder with the rope attached, and before they took it away slowly to let him dangle and strangle a little bit, he jumped. He jumped off the scaffold. And this somehow, with an editor, became Guy Fawkes died when he jumped off scaffolding. What was he, a cowboy builder? How I suffer for my art is what I'm saying. When I published 350 books or something, Horrible Histories are starting to slowly drop off in sales after 35 years. There's nothing wrong with that, 30 years. But I always wanted to move into adult books. And people say, what inspired you to write, and I haven't got a copy of the book here, A History of the World in 10 Enemies? Because the theme of it is that you can only measure yourself against other people. You can't just say, I am great. Compared to what? And it came from talking to a group of Cub Scouts. Because I was in the Cub Scouts. My main reason was so I could play football for them on a Saturday. And I was great. I was fantastic. Every week I scored at least one goal. One week I scored 6 goals before half time. As we went in at half time, 7-0 up. Referee blew his whistle, started the second half. I ran down the pitch and scored my 7th goal. 8-0. Referee blew his whistle full time. What? Saving the opposition from further punishment, which is very humane. And for many, many years, I daren't say how many, I thought I was a great footballer. What England's football team had lost was nobody's business. And it began to dawn on me that I wasn't. I was only as good as the opposition. And the opposition that day was a bunch of little kids who could dribble around like cans of milk and score. What the referee really should have done is he should have told us that and said, look, they're hopeless. Why don't you just stand still and let them score a few goals? You know, that's, looking back, that would have been nice. But then it occurred to me, if I'm going to write a history book about nationalism in Britain, Britain is only as good as the people they come up against. So you look at Britain from the other point of view, from the point of view of enemies. Because British history tends to be, what we did. I was talking to the Chelsea History Society Festival. I didn't tell them I'm not a historian, right? I just pretended I was. And I asked them a question, which I will ask you. Don't shout out the answer. Right? True story. World War II. The bombs are raining down on the city, and every night the air raid warning sounds. But this particular night, the air raid warning sounded, and a woman had grown tired of all the false alarms. So she thought, I'll go to the air raid shelter and I will leave my children asleep in their bedroom because it'll be another false alarm. And you can guess the result. When she came out of the air raid shelter the next morning, her 2 children were dead. The house had been bombed. And the question is, in which city did this happen? And you now may guess. Which city was it? Sunderland. Good one. No. Sorry, where? Coventry. What a great answer. No. Yeah, Dresden. Everybody at the Chelsea History Festival was saying, yeah, London, Coventry, Hull, because we have been conditioned by our teaching to see history through the eyes of Britain. And they forget that there were other people in this war as well who weren't British. It's rather like saying, look at a field, and that is world history. And when it's taught by teachers, they look at it through a telescope. And what you see from a telescope is just the small portion that the teachers want you to see. Because you can't teach the whole of world history. Why not? Because you can't test it. It's too much. So instead they just teach British history. And it distorts thinking. And this is why people come up with the idea that Britain is great. Is it? And that is the view I try to challenge. They hold up heroes. They hold up Britain's great successes, but these great successes are not as great as you're taught in school. For example, Britain's proudest moment was defeating the Spanish Armada. Was it? Was it really? Because you see, the Spanish Armada was very incompetently run, and it was defeated by gales. And then along comes Elizabeth I. Oh, wonderful Elizabeth I. In the golden age of Tudor Britain, our heroine, she stands with her soldiers down the road at Tilbury Docks. And she says to them, I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and the King of England at that. I come among you, my people, to fight among you, to live and die alongside you. What no history teacher I know ever tells you is, when Elizabeth said that, it was 10 days after the Spanish Armada had been wrecked. The survivors were somewhere up in the north of Scotland. There was absolutely no chance of Elizabeth dying, even if she did go and fight. It was propaganda. This is the sort of thing that legends or myths are turned into legends. The other one that annoys me is the downplaying of the real people who do the work. When people say to you, who's your favourite character in history? They want me to say, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Henry VIII, all the big names. It's not, it's Jack Crawford. You haven't heard of him. The fact he comes from Sunderland does not in any way prejudice me from my view that he's one of the greatest heroes Britain's never heard of. Anybody heard of Nelson? Lord Nelson? Of course you have, because he's got a bloody big statue in Trafalgar Square. He sits up on the top because he's a hero. He won the Battle of Trafalgar, but the Battle of Trafalgar would never have been fought if it hadn't been for Jack Crawford. You see, 8 years before Trafalgar was fought, the French, who didn't have a great navy, turned to their mates, the Dutch, and said, look, you're on the Dutch coast, will you sail across the North Sea and wipe out the English fleet for us? Then we can cross the channel and invade Britain. And the Dutch said, yeah. Everyone a critic. And so the English fleet came out to meet them under Admiral Duncan, and they were getting a bit of a pasting. And then the biggest disaster of all came when the top of Admiral Duncan's mast was blown off, and down came his flag of leadership, his colours as they're called, and that meant defeat. So he very quickly turned to the crew and said, will some man go back up to what's left of the mast and nail the colours back onto the top of the mast? And Jack Crawford from Sunderland says, why, I swore I'd do that. Which translated means, yes, sir, I will volunteer. I saw, I did that. He climbed the mast. The Dutch saw what was happening and trained muskets on him, and the musket ball went through his cheek. He kept going. He nailed the colours to the mast. And after that, the battle turned. It was the battle at the place called Camperdown. And the British Navy in the North Sea defeated the Dutch. If the British Navy had lost that battle, Britain would have been invaded. I'd have been speaking to you en français. Well, you wouldn't have understood me anyway because you'd be Dutch. And there would have been no Battle of Trafalgar, no Lord Nelson. He gets a big monument in the middle of London. Jack Crawford got a pension, but he drank it all away, and he died of cholera in the slums of Sunderland. He's forgotten. 80 years after he died, they did put up a statue about that big in a local park, which is not quite the same as the middle of London, is it? You know, Jack Crawford, forgotten hero, but Lord Nelson, who recently was revealed to have written a letter extolling the virtues of the slave trade for his mates who made a good profit from, he's up in Trafalgar Square. Who is the greatest hero in history for me? It's two of them actually, Mr. and Mrs. Peasant. They are the greatest heroes. How am I doing for time? It's 6:55. Nobody stopped me. Tell you what, I will stop by telling you about my campaign. That we should forget about being British and anybody outside Britain is an enemy. There's a fella in America whose name I can't remember, who wears red caps with Make America Great Again, or the shorthand is MAGA. I want red caps with WAAH on them. We are all human. Whether you're the woman in Dresden, or you're Jack Crawford, or you're Julius Caesar, we're all at the end of the day human. And if we remember that, if that's what we're taught, rather than Britain is great, yay, then maybe we eventually get peace in this world in about 1,000,000 years' time. So thank you. Where's my microphone lady who's going to take questions? Here she comes. She's running. Thank you. She's sprinting. Where is she? There she is. Here is Lily, who I just call Lucy.
Are there any questions? We've got 2 microphones so we can...
Let's shut them up then.
That's great, thank you.
Terry, it's not a question, it's just a comment. I've just texted my 15-year-old daughter to say I've been listening to you, and she said, bloody great. So, thank
Obviously,
you very much indeed.
A young lady of taste and discernment, with a wonderful parent, you know, who I hope buys my books. But so many people write to me now saying, I'm going to university to study history because of your books. My reply is, don't blame me, mate.
Hi, yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about things like about all historical events being
Oh, there he is.
being shrouded so much in legend and myth.
Yeah.
And now I think given our current audience, this might be slightly more contentious.
Oh.
I'm not a professional historian. If I said to you that the evacuation at Dunkirk and the Battle of Britain were now more myth and legend than reality, what would you say?
I haven't studied it enough. You know, there is a lot of legend. And one of the things that interests me is that at Agincourt, Henry VIII, according to Shakespeare, said, we few, we precious few, we brand of brothers. And Churchill pinched from Shakespeare to call them the few. When you are in a war, I think you can justify bigging up your side. Afterwards, there's a time for reflection. And the other thing, I've got to be honest, and I'm going to write about this in the book I'm going home to write, A History of the World in 10 Wars. Is there ever any justification for a war? And the Nazis in Germany come very, very close to me saying yes. So if those people fighting in the air or at Dunkirk helped defeat the Nazis, then I'm tempted to be swayed and say, yeah, there are some cases.
Yeah, I get that. I think more I was thinking about our treatment of it since. Did you see?
Yeah, yeah.
How it goes into popular history rather than factual history.
I know, but people need heroes. That's why they've stuck Lord Nelson on the top there, who had tens of thousands of people watching his funeral. People need heroes. Just got to be careful who those heroes are. If it's the ordinary people, the ordinary soldier who came off the beaches at Dunkirk, and not Montgomery who got knighted for his troubles, you know, the ordinary soldier, then you've got to admire them. But yes, myths, legends do get confused.
Hi, first I want to say thank you. I've just really enjoyed this talk today. So I have two friends who, they're teachers of like children in primary schools, and you were talking a bit about the teaching of world history. And I mean, we live in a time where there's so much information that can be accessed, and yet there's still so much misunderstanding and misinformation. How do you think would be the best approach for someone in education to try to teach a good, kind of more well-rounded form of history?
Well, I would look at social history. I would look at how people lived, not the big battles of Trafalgar, not the big invasions by the Romans. What were the ordinary people doing? How did they live? Compare ourselves to them. It's social history against military or political history. But military and political history have dominated, and they still are. But one day, I'll knock them down off their column in Trafalgar Square. Mr. and Mrs. Peasant rule.
Hello.
Hello.
So I did world history for GCSE, and then I did ancient and modern for A level. Something which I can't help but notice is how we spent a lot of time working, you know, on learning about Russia or with World War II, or we learned about Queen Victoria. For that bit bored me. Well, I'll be honest. We never learned about the British Empire. That's one thing I noticed, is that we never learned about the sort of crappy side of, you know, how we, the country, have sort of grown. Now I compare that to Germany and how they deal with teaching about, you know, World War II and the atrocities of Nazi Germany, and I wonder what your perspective is on this.
I wrote a book called The Balmy British Empire, and of all the books I've written, that got the most hate mail from the right wing, who said you are poisoning the minds of our children, because I was telling them the truth. This is why teachers won't handle that hot potato. Do you know about the native Tasmanians? No, why not? You know, people know about the Holocaust and the genocide. Nobody knows about the Tasmanians. The British landed in 1880, and there were 20,000 Aboriginal Tasmanians. After 60 years, there were none. It was genocide. It was perpetrated by the British, and nobody tells you this. And why not? Because I can tell them, because people can write me hate mail, and it's water off a duck's back. Because I know if that sort of person hates me, then I must be doing something right. But it's a shame that you, as I say, are not aware. Intelligent young man, studied history, studied the ancients, but doesn't know these important facets of Britain. And it's not just the British Empire. It's, as my book says, it's Britain through the ages. And some of the things they never tell you. With jokes. I was writing a diatribe against nationalism, about people who say Britain is great, everybody else is rubbish. And I thought I was writing a serious book, and then the reviews started to come out, laugh out loud. I said to a friend of mine, this is so disappointing. I was trying to take, he said, look at page 96. Lord Nelson. I wouldn't say he was a small fella, but his family tree was a bonsai. All right, yeah, I put jokes in. I think as a writer, if anybody wants to be a writer, the most important thing, apart from the reader, is to engage the reader. I read so many history books for research, and I'm asleep after page 2 because they've gone to university, which is a huge disadvantage because they learn how to write in a formal way, which sends me to sleep. I'm an entertainer. There you go. That's life. Oh, sorry, has anybody here been to university? Big school.
Hello.
Hello.
When you talked earlier about writing plays, over here. Hi. When you talked earlier about writing plays like The Custer's Kids and so on, did you have a desire to write any more in the future, or are you working on one now?
Oh yeah, I'm writing one for Christmas. It's not a Christmas show, but it's in a big professional theatre in Newcastle. Yeah, I'm a playwright.
Amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Me, Shakespeare. You know. No, I'm not a great fan of Shakespeare. He's a bit derivative. He's a bit formulaic. 5 acts. My hero is Samuel Beckett. Waiting for Godot. Oh, wish I'd written that.
We have a question from the live stream audience, and then we'll go over there. Someone from the live stream has asked, you mentioned that all the periods in history have been cruel and inhumane, but have there been any civilizations who ruled by empathy or by kindness, and do you think that's a feasible way to govern a people?
I write horrible histories. If I've ever come across somebody who is the perfect utopia, then I must have forgotten it. I don't think there is any perfect society. So no, the honest answer is I haven't come across one. But I don't know world history because I can only know a tiny, tiny fraction of the history of the world. If I come across one, I'll let you know. I'll write a book about it.
Hi. Thank you so much for your talk. I studied history at university. I'm so sorry.
Don't blame me.
And this was over 15 years ago. And at the time, and it was very well established, I think the turn to social history and being very critical about the British Empire and our past was very real. And it had been the case, I think, for over 10 years. And it seems that since then that has somewhat filtered down across the educational system, certainly in this country and in many other Western countries. And yet, to your point, at T0, the cultural narrative seems to be going the other way and turning back to more insular and nationalistic kind of identities and narratives about ourselves. So how has that disconnect happened? And what, if anything, can we do to reverse it?
Wow. First of all, I'd get rid of the national curriculum, written by a bunch of muppets in Whitehall who wouldn't know a real child if it jumped up and bit them on the kneecaps. Because these are the people who are writing and telling our teachers, this is what you should be telling your children. We are a little bit right-wing because we are the establishment, but we want you to teach our children to be establishment muppets. There's a Holocaust survivor called Primo Levi who said, "It is the duty of every righteous man to make war on undeserved privilege." And that is my motto as well. But the undeserved privilege are sitting in Whitehall, and it's not in their interest to breed rebellion in our children. So first of all, I can't say burn down Whitehall, can I? I get sacked for. First of all, get rid of national curriculum, get rid of Ofstapo as well, while they're on. And let teachers, there are some fabulous teachers out there, let them teach, right? And get rid of government interference in schools. I think that's the only way we'll reverse it. Write to your local MP now. God, I sometimes rant, don't I?
Hi.
Touched a raw nerve there.
Thank you so much for all of your work. I still remember so many beautiful anecdotes from your books, beautiful / gruesome anecdotes from your books from when I was little. I run colonial history workshops, and sometimes the teachers say at schools that they're going to have to run another workshop on the other side after I leave, which always kind of worries me a bit. But I was wondering after that question about whether you have done any policy work with the Ministry of Education or any work training teachers. I mean, I'm sure so many teachers are being inspired by your books, and particularly the Balmy Britain one. So thank you for writing that one.
I couldn't make a living from writing children's books until 1990. And because I had a drama teaching award qualification as part of my actor training, I was able to teach drama. And because drama teachers didn't have a full-time job, they would make me teach English as well, with no qualifications, but what the hell. And because I was such a bad teacher, they made me into an advisory teacher, teaching other teachers how to do it. In 1987, when the national curriculum was being created, they couldn't take teachers out of the classroom to write the new national curriculum. So what they did was they took the advisory teachers, like me, and sent us down to London to advise the writers of the national curriculum. And because I was from the north, they listened very politely to what I said and totally ignored it. It was tokenism. It took me a while to realise this, to read this god-awful national curriculum in English and spoken English, but one person, even me, cannot stand up against this. It's got to be a movement, you know? It's got to come from the ground upwards. It's got to come from teachers who say, okay, and some teachers do say this to me now, that yes, we will teach the national curriculum so that children don't suffer as a result, but we will also cram in as much real education as we possibly can. So I think that is the compromise for me.
Hi. So I was just wondering, given all the research that you've done, the amount of history that you've kind of looked at, what do you think the world would be different if women ran the world?
150%. This is something I try to get into my books, not only peasant history, but women. You know? It's amazing how they've been ignored in the past, degraded, and generally by the historians, it's always a history of men. And it's very, very difficult for me as a non-historian to find women in history that I can pull out into popular history. So absolutely, yeah, power to the women. You can rule me any time you like. My wife does, so I'm not telling her.
We've got another question emailed in from a live stream attendee who asks, of the enemies that you cover in your book, were there any that it looked like Britain would not have triumphed against? And, you know, who would that have been?
I think most of them, if they'd been more competent, would have beaten us. The Americans hadn't got their act together when we were fighting them in 1812. They were a real threat because they had wonderful things like submarines, you know, which came out. And some of them did conquer us. The Saxons conquered us and made us. And the Vikings. The Vikings, just through poor leadership, failed in the end. You know, they had Alfred the Great pinned in the corner of England, and he fought his way out. So I think probably the Vikings were the closest we've come to being invaded. The French were useless. They sent a ship around to the Bristol Channel to invade Britain, to go up and raise support in Wales because the Welsh were ready to rebel against the English every day of every year. You know. But they got blown off course, so they landed on the west coast. And the French army were mainly freed convicts. And they discovered on the shore a previous shipwreck had washed ashore barrels of wine, which they finished off before setting off to invade. They killed a chicken, which enraged the farmer, Jemima Nichols, a woman, who went after them with a pitchfork, and they surrendered. It's a great story. You'll find it in the book called A History of Britain in 10 Enemies. Women, yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question.
One more question.
Yeah. Or perhaps. And if there is no final question, there's also an opportunity to come and talk to Terry whilst he signs your book.
Yep.
But in the meantime, please do give him a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.